My name is Kim Sims, and I'm the University Archivist at the College of William and Mary. I'm interviewing Van Black, a member of the William and Mary class of 1975. Today's date is July 16th, 2015, and the interview is being recorded in the Charles W. Reader Media Center's production studio and Swem Library at the College of William and Mary. The subject of today's interview is the Staying Connected initiative, more formally known as Staying Connected Together Serving Others. So Van, I'll start off with some life history questions.
Okay.
The first being, could you tell us when and where were you born?
Born August 25th, 1953, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And what years did you attend William and Mary?
Luckily only 4, 1971 to 75.
Okay, and what was your major?
I was a government major.
And can you describe your career path post-graduation?
Sure. I started out, 2 years I stayed at William & Mary and as an area director in residence halls. After that, I finished my master's degree in counselor education at JMU and took a year as director of residence halls with a little career counseling on the side at Wilmington College in Ohio. From there, I joined General Electric on their corporate relations management program. So I was in multiple businesses in multiple different cities and different types of human resources work. From there, I did human resources, organizational development, change management work as an operational person in companies like GE, Citibank, Hobart, and then decided to go out and do consulting to work with multiple organizations instead of just one organization. I would throw in a little twist there in that part of my career for 2 years was doing child care, which is very counterculture to everything else I've done. But when I was vice president of human resources for an organization in Delaware, they had started a child care center, which reported to me because I was in human resources, and they said, child care is a benefit. Children are humans. You're human resources. You should be in charge of child care. I said, well, I have no children. I really don't want any children. I'm perfect for this job. But after a year, the organization decided to close the center. And I got on my high horse and quit my job in exchange for the severance I was entitled, incorporated the child care center as a nonprofit business, and opened it to the public, but guaranteed spots for our employees who were using it. So most of the life has been human resources, organizational development, change management, coaching, with a twist like that thrown in there. I went out on my own to do consulting in 2003 after working for a global consulting company in Pittsburgh. But in 2003, I went out on my own, and for 10 or 12 years until I started Staying Connected, I did consulting work with organizations large and small, mostly around culture change, coaching, all the areas I mentioned before.
Okay. So what is Staying Connected Together Serving Others?
Staying Connected is an initiative of our class of 75, started at our homecoming 35th reunion 5 years ago. And it's a commitment we made to connect our classmates and other alums directly with undergraduate William & Mary students around networking, career development, and the most unique part is around service. So we support individual students and student organizations by bringing alums who have interest in those causes, topics, or just building relationships with students and reconnecting with the college. And it could be around hunger or literacy. We sponsor the Active Citizens Conference out of the Office of Community Engagement through Dear Stelgis. Do a lot of career development work. But mainly it is we had 3 principles when we started. One was that we weren't going to have a reunion every 5 years like other classes. We'd have a reunion every year. So our class has stayed connected in that way. and we have a reunion. Our 6th annual is coming up this October. The second thing was we really wanted to get alums, and our classmates in particular, exposed to the day-to-day life of the college 35 to 40 years after they participated in it. Many had never been engaged with the college since they left. They may have attended a football game, they may have sent in, check for fundraising, but many had not been connected for a long time in a very personal way. So connecting with undergraduates, and then the service and career development were the pieces that were of special interest to us. We had a launch of Staying Connected officially in February 2011 during Charter Day weekend. And we thought we'd get 20 people total. And we ended up with 48 people show up on a rainy day at Barb Ramsey's house. We were in her kitchen, her porch, her lobby, her foyer, her stairwell. And it was 2/3 alums, primarily our classmates, and students that we had a connection with. And the connections were bizarre. My connection was Jarrett Burns. My sister, my older sister, and his mother were team teachers together in Chicago. And my sister said, well, one of my best friends has a son at William & Mary. You should invite him. So not only did we invite him, and he came, but he ended up staying for graduate school and being a graduate assistant for Tribe Partners, which is one of the outgrowths of Staying Connected on the career development side. Somebody else's connection was somebody was the daughter of a neighbor when they lived in Germany. It was bizarre. But everybody had a connection, and Staying Connected's whole purpose is a grassroots, personal connection invite. It's no mass advertising. It's all relational. And it's all just, a groundswell of grassroots.
So it's attributed to the class of 1975, but would you say the initiative is largely your brainchild, or was it something organically created in conversation with your classmates?
Oh, it was my brainchild. My life and career are in strategic planning and culture, and you have a vision, you have a mission, you have an implementation plan, you make it happen. Staying Connected violates every one of those principles in terms of how it got started. I was at the 35th reunion. Barb Tatum Kelly, a classmate, and Jim Harmon are the two conversations I remember most, both classmates. And during a cocktail party at the lodge, they were telling me about organizations they were involved with or they had known about alums who were giving back to the community. And probably 5 or 6 people over the weekend were telling me these stories. I have no idea why. And I was sitting at our brunch, our first class of 75 homecoming brunch at Barb's house. And I was looking around the room. I said, here's a CEO, here's a doctor, here's the head of a nonprofit. What if we could ever corral this talent for William & Mary? It's wonderful that people give back to the community, but what about the William & Mary community? What could we do there? And so out of my mouth came, I will run the 40th reunion on 3 conditions. And it goes back to those 3 things. 1, we'll have a reunion every year. 2, we'll connect with undergrads. And people said, well, like what? What do you have in mind? I said, I have no idea. I just said it. I have no idea what this plan is. So me, the planner, is just spontaneously committing 5 years of my life to do this undefined kind of thing. And so the weekend passed. I flew home. I was living in Texas at the time. And I wrote a 5-year strategic plan. Very cursory, but maybe 3 pages. And then went in the next week and told all my clients that I was dropping them and give them 2 months notice because I was going to do volunteer work for William & Mary for 5 years. And they all thought I'd lost my mind. I probably thought I lost my mind. My classmates knew I'd lost my mind. But it was just very intuitive. This is something that I think the college needs. It's something that plays to my strengths. I have the passion to do it, and I have no idea what I'm doing or how it's going to play out, but I'm a smart William & Mary person. I'll make it happen. So that's how it got started. As soon as I put together that plan, I did a lot of vetting of the plan. First, I went externally. I went to a colleague of mine, Paul Carroll, a former colleague of mine who's a behavioral consultant, organizational behavior consultant, because he knows me well enough to know my strengths and weaknesses and poke holes in my ideas. So he gave me lots of feedback about what to do. I went to a former higher ed colleague at Wilmington College who now lives in Stanton, Virginia. And so she could take the higher ed and career development perspective and let her poke holes in it. And then I went on a tour of Virginia talking to different alums about what they thought of the idea and whether they would support it. And after all those, I wound up in Williamsburg the week before Thanksgiving. So this all happened between the end of October and Thanksgiving, and talked to various administrators here. I had to introduce myself. They had no idea, who is this person? Where did he get this idea? How does he intend to pull this off? And then we had a holiday letter, which I brought you a copy of. I sent an email to 300 classmates. The alumni office gave me the list of our classmates. I had to sign my life away. But I got the list of classmates, and I sent an email to people that I knew, people that I was pretty sure would remember me and take an email and not delete it, and just said, here's this idea. At the time, we called it 40 for the 40th. Let's do 40 activities that would satisfy, connecting with students. And I got a lot of emails back because they were wrong email addresses. But from those I did get back, we got over 200 ideas from people about things that we could do. So I knew it was the right time. Our class was the right class to do something like this. And we brought all of those ideas to the launch that I mentioned in February and let students react to it, saying, here's what our needs are, here's what our priorities are. And from there, we just started doing what they suggested we do.
So when Staying Connected started, you were living in Texas. You currently live in Florida. So how do you manage staying connected from afar?
Probably the most interesting part is how I got from Texas to Florida. Staying connected, especially because we choose not to do the mass advertising, took a while to find its feet. We had activities going and we're having successes from the beginning, but the word wasn't out to campus about it, so it was slow, like a grassroots movement in evolving. But by the end of the second year, it was clear this was a lot bigger than I ever dreamt it was going to be. I had no vision about how big it would become, but it got a lot bigger to the point where I was spending 70, 80, 90 days on campus and managing it and connecting students and alums and meeting new student organizations. And I decided that I can't afford financially to keep doing this. So I sold my house and moved to Florida, because eventually I figured I would end up in Florida anyway, and bought a really, really cheap place to live, and am living off the meager profits I made on that sale of the house in Texas. But the way I manage it from afar is I'm here a lot. Last year was 110 days, and probably spend 25 or 30 hours a week virtually, on the computer, emailing people back and forth, taking phone calls, having conference calls, connecting with classmates, connecting with students. My email is out of control normally. And even during slow periods like breaks and holidays in the summer, it's almost all my email is William & Mary students or alums. So it's It wasn't hard to manage. It was just financially like the worst decision I ever made in my life. But it was probably the personally most rewarding decision I ever made. And I figured I'll figure out how to earn money again when this is over. I hope.
In a publicity video, Staying Connected was described as honoring the example so many of our classmates have provided since graduation in giving their time, talent, and treasure to the college and to the communities where they live. You've also stated that it is the class of 75 family and friends. What do these statements mean?
Okay, I'll take the second one first, class of 75 family and friends. So class of 75 is my classmates and I. And in some cases, their spouses and significant others. The family has two definitions. One is the William and Mary family, so alums, faculty, staff. But family also means literal, our families. So for an example, Ann and Mark Woolley, who you know, who've run the Pappy Fair project through Swem, they're coming up on their 10th archiving event. But they have two children, Jen, who went to William and Mary, and she comes to most of the archiving events, and she's done coaching of students, who are interested in the careers or want to move to Northern Virginia where she lives. And if you've ever seen my business card or our logo, that was developed by their son, James, who has no connection other than being surrounded by William and Mary people at home. So that's one entire family who have been involved with us. The Schultz family, Karen Schultz and Jean Schultz, husband and wife, are both classmates. Both of their children went to William and Mary. Karen has been a big player with us and is a head of the Center for Public Service and Scholarship at Shenandoah. So not only has she helped students here through coaching, through networking, she's also gotten jobs for students and hired William and Mary students to be counselors for her Leadership by Design program in the summer. She's been active in the DC Summer Institute. And she's now on the Board of Visitors. And so Karen has been a supporter from the beginning. Her husband, Gene, is now doing some archiving connections with Allison Herring, who's a Mac graduate. She didn't go to William and Mary undergrad, but so they're connecting over some historical Civil War kinds of things. And when Allison told me what she was doing, I said, I know somebody who will just be excited about this. And then both of their children have been involved in either attending events or coaching other students, mentoring other students. So there's another whole family. And the last example would be my own family. During Thanksgiving 2 years ago, we did a Stop Hunger Now meal packing event. So my three sisters, three of my nieces, and alumni from the area and customers of my sister's restaurant did a meal packing event during Thanksgiving for Stop Hunger Now. And our connection with that is also that the person who was head of college programs for Stop Hunger Now internationally is a classmate, Jan Riviero. So family is literally family members in addition to the William and Mary family of students, alums, faculty. Now the first question is about, we're building on a foundation. Our class has a bunch of rock stars who have been involved with William and Mary since the day they left. I mentioned Karen Schultz is on the Board of Visitors now, Lynn Dillon on the Board of Visitors, Marilyn Ward Midyett is head of the Alumni Association. Sam Jones is COO or whatever his title is these days. He used to be CFO and now is promoted. So John Gertelman, who heads up campaigns and was a former Board of Visitors member. Nancy Gofis, who has done so many things to help the college, both in the government department, in the communications department, leveraging her own experience. And there are more. We have people on all kinds of giving boards, foundation boards. Our class has always been engaged with the college since they graduated. So me coming in 35 years later, after having been very tangentially involved over the years, just brought in a bunch of new kinds of classmates who haven't always been as connected. But we have the example that our classmates have set for us about giving back to the college. So some of the unique things about what we're doing, though, are that it's more time and talent than it is treasure. So more using your experiences, your careers, your knowledge areas than it is giving money. Even though I would say once people got engaged with staying connected, their own giving probably went up. And many of our alums have started giving to student organizations and community causes that they've been connected with through students. So the giving has gone up, but the focus has really been on time and talent, which is all I really have to give. I don't have the money to give, and I've given up my income, so if you want to count that, that's a lot of money. But really it's time and talent. But the other thing I haven't mentioned is that everything is volunteer. Everything is self-funded. Everything, our travel, wherever anybody comes from, all the donations we make, and everything is out of our own pockets. So I think it's like 1.5%. It's one of the few things I've ever tracked. About 1.5% has come from the college in like in-kind expenses, like when Swem's kind enough to provide food, when somebody says, hey, we'll pick up your housing, we're going to have you stay at Plumeri House, we'll pick that up for you. So that's about 1.5, which means 98.5% in 5 years has really been self-funded. And that and the service component to me are so unique. We had a graduate student who volunteered to be like an intern for us. And her project was to research where else in the United States there were similar programs. And we found lots of programs. Maggie Scott, she found lots of programs that involved career development, admissions, fundraising, and athletics. But around the service component, we didn't find any. And my guess is they're out there because it was me who came up with the idea. It can't be that brilliant an idea. There's got to be other people who thought of the same thing. But we really haven't found other programs that focus on the service, connection with undergraduates. And it's been the hallmark of really what we do. It really differentiates us from other alumni kind of programs.
So what are some of the key programs?
One well, the very first and longest lasting program is actually the Pappy Fair Swem archiving project. So the 10th annual's the 10th event's coming up on Saturday. Mark and Ann Woolley, Ann being a classmate, Mark being class of 77. When I vetted the idea with them, along with those external consultants back in November 2010, when I told him about the idea, Mark's first reaction was, wow, this is the first time somebody has contacted me about doing something for the college other than asking for money. He goes, I like that. That's really cool. And Ann said, would it count? And I thought, oh, she's looking for criteria. And I have no idea. Would it count if we did something to help the library? I said, like what? She said, well, when Jen was here as a student, Mark and I went into the archives and we're looking at old pictures, and they're not going to be around, 5 years from now because, some of them aren't in really great shape. And we don't want to donate a piece of equipment and just give it to Swem. We'd like to do something like you're talking about, which helps us bring alums together and connect them with students. So I said, why don't you think about that, put some thought into it, and let's get back and talk again. And they lived a half hour from me, so it was great. They had me for dinner twice. And I came back, and Ann has a notebook, a 3-hole binder, 8 categories. Here's what we've done already. We contacted Amy Schindler at the Swem. Here's what Van needs to do. Here's the list of the alums that we want to contact. And people who knew Ann when she was president of the choir knew she was the most organized person in the world. Ann has not changed in 40 years. She's still the most organized person in the world. And so I said, yeah, let's go do it. And I guess it was Charter Day of... No, I'm not sure when the first one actually was. But it was that next cycle, so it was like during the next semester, but I'm not sure the exact day of the first. And now they've done it 10 times. And the feedback we get from the classmates who come to these things is just like, wow, this is awesome. You know, you can Facebook, you can keep in touch with social media, but there's nothing like just reconnecting personally, catching up on each other's lives. And they used the choir in the Pappy Fair days, and he was only their director for the first 2 years that they were here. It wasn't like all 4 years. And that has branched out into them helping Swem through like Civil War to civil rights kinds of initiatives and other initiatives that you guys have. And so that's how Allison Herring, who I mentioned, got involved. Ann and Mark, for one of our programs we did in Dallas, because we did 13 programs in 13 months in Dallas. Since we were living there, I said, might as well try it here. We added Panera Bread, got a bunch of alums who were interested in archiving and finding out what it was. And she did the demos on how to do it and brought up some Civil War letters that she and Mark had been working on. And Allison Herring, who we didn't know at all, was one of those people. And now she's been doing it for a couple of years and just very passionate about it. So that's the biggest and longest lasting one. Some of the other programs have been supporting, like the Office of Community Engagement in their annual conference, the Active Citizens Conference. So we provide not only speakers for them, and have done some panels ourselves, we have helped them get alums to come back who work in those fields. We provide scholarships for students who want to attend but can't afford the registration fees. So that's been 4 years of doing that. One of the programs which we get way too much credit for, and all the credit really belongs to Sam Pressler, who's just graduated in May, is the William Murray Center for Veterans Engagement. I met Sam during a mock interview, and I've done 375 mock interviews or something like that in my time here. And we have troops of alums who come back and do mock interviews and coaching and virtual coaching, mentoring. But Sam brought up, as I was going through his resume, his interest in veterans. And I said, why don't we set up a separate time to talk about that, because I'd like to understand that one more. And so connected him to a few alums who I knew had veterans connections, sort of helped him figure out how to navigate some of the internal William & Mary groups that might be supportive. And Sam really took it from there. And it started out as a veterans writing project that was in the picture or the painting that was done. And so that's been run multiple times now. And now it has grown to what he calls expressive arts. So it's music, it's writing, it's stand-up comedy. Sam would say the greatest gift we gave him was referring students to him who could lead those different projects. And he'll say, I know if you give me somebody, I don't have to worry about those people. So people like Ryan Goss, who's a student, Anna Wong, who's a student, one's a junior, they're now seniors and juniors, will be the people who can sustain that. And Sam just, I don't know if you saw it in the William Mary News, but Sam just was awarded what's called an Echoing Green Fellowship. There were 3,500 applicants in 44 countries, and he is taking this concept and going to do it nationally. It's now called the Armed Services Arts Partnership, ASAP. So he's moved to DC. He gets like $80,000 worth of funding from this organization, having been selected. But the biggest benefit to him is that he gets a worldwide network of people who have all started their own organizations, who have their own networks, who have their own expertise in legal, marketing, social change. He's in heaven, he's in heaven. So I'm meeting with him next week about how he's going to design his organization, what's going to be the board he has, what's going to be an advisory board, the role clarity. So I get to use my own organizational background to help him, start up his business. So the Swem archiving, all the career development stuff, the Active Citizens Conference, that's four big things. And there's a lot of them. The video you referenced list at the end, here's a bunch of groups that we've supported. And there's just a lot. It amazes me in doing this video and having had to put together for other different requests, what we've done is actually sort of fun to see the results of what was sort of a crazy spontaneous idea and how far it came.
Are there any programs people might be surprised to learn about?
Programs. One activity I know they'd be surprised about is the coaching we've done for William & Mary alums students. So students who didn't go to William & Mary, but their classmates or alums saying, well, I know you do this for William & Mary students. Would you mind talking to my son? They're really thinking about making a career transition and is just really lost. Or another alum who was class of 77 who said, my son's in New York and is doing really well, but he really wants to make a career change. He's paying $200 an hour for a career consultant, and what would you charge? And I said, well, really, I'll be happy to talk to him. I'm not going to charge him anything. And so that's been a year-long, coaching assignment, and probably have 7 or 8 of those, and that's just me. So, we don't do a great job of tracking everything else everybody else is doing because it's very holistic and it's very organic, but it is fun to hear about things that I have no idea about. Oh, well, we did that because of when we met so-and-so. I said, that's cool. That's what it's all supposed to be. Spread the word, pay back, give forward, whatever. So that would be one surprise. The biggest surprise most people would have was when I hear about, well, it must be great, Van, to be so wealthy that you can afford to take off 5 years. Trust me, there is not an ounce of truth to that. It is true that I figured out a way to do it. But it was not because I had money sitting around. That's why I sold the house. I live like a little pauper right now. But I'll go back to work, half-time at least. That's probably the biggest misconception or surprise people have.
That was going to be my next question, or misconceptions people might have about staying connected.
Yeah, that's one, and I think a lot of people assume that the college funds a lot of it, which isn't the case, which makes the sustainability of it harder. Because I know something we'll explore is, what happens next? And I don't really have a great answer to that yet. I know there are people like Barb Ramsey who not only hosts so many events for us, hosts tons of events on her own, bringing alums and students together. And that's not staying connected, that's just Barb, who staying connected was like a burst of energy for her, and she loved it and is great at it. And so she now is co-chair of the Lord Botetourt auction annually, which raises money for Tribe Athletics. She was Tribe Volunteer of the Year last year. She's on the local alumni board, and all those things have happened since she got involved with staying connected. So there are so many people who've gotten so involved in things, and they're not staying connected activities, but staying connected was part of them getting exposed to it, finding out they loved it. Corey Trench, who's class of 76 and helped us in the very beginning and did a lot of career development work. He now has passion about mental health in the community and is a leader of a couple of initiatives in Williamsburg, James City County around mental health. So we got a lot of people who have gone off and found their own passion through initial exposure, and a whole bunch of people who really were frustrated with wanting to help but not knowing how, or being either rebuffed or nobody following through when they offered help. We have enough of a track record to coach them in terms of how they can, help the college and who the right people are to talk to and how to build their case for it. Because really, nobody jumped for joy when I shared this with the college back in November 2010. I think they must, if I could read their mind, it was like, yeah, we've heard these ideas before, or who is this guy? But I'm not sure they knew who they were dealing with in terms of when I get an idea in my head, we're going to make it happen. And luckily, really, it's been amazingly easy. And the more success we had, the more people and the more students. And it's been a joy. Not without its obstacles, but it's been a joy.
So you touched earlier on what differentiates staying connected from other alumni activities, but I'm wondering if you can expand on
Yeah,
that some.
yeah, I think the focus areas like the service is one differentiator. The fact that it's all self-funded, another one. But I think the biggest differentiator, and I'm sure others would disagree, is that many activities that I see from the Alumni Society and I participate in myself tend to be event-driven. And I know Marilyn's making great progress in sort of making it more engagement-driven. She and Matthew Lambert, that's their goal, is to make it more engagement-driven. But when you come to a staying connected event, it's so high engaging. An example would be like if there's a panel discussion at not only an alumni event, but a career services event or anything where you have a panel discussion. It's pretty much panel talks and then it's Q&A. When we do it, it's things like before the panel talks, you get the students and alums together to talk about what are the pressing issues they have, what are the things they're really curious about. You get them all warmed up so that it is really engaging. And they're also meeting the other alums and the students, in both directions. So they're building those relationships. They're not just sitting at a table and maybe they exchanged a business card. They're really getting to know those people. So if you look at what we call our approach, the Staying Connected approach document, which is like a philosophy statement, we try to balance not only what we do, the service, the careers, but it's how we do it. It is engaging. It is that every person who participates, whether it's a student, a faculty member, a staff, or an alum, leaves there wanting to do it again and feels they got a personal win out of it. When we bring alums back to do career-related kinds of things, they always go, oh my God, when's the next one? Let me do this. It's not like sort of, oh, that was cool. Check off the box, I did my alumni, event for the year. It's amazing. And in fact, we've had trouble in sometimes meeting the demands. Like, why can't we do more of this? Why can't we do more of that? So I think it's just a differentiator is how we do things. They're not events. People would call them events. They're just highly interactive events. And it's just fascinating to watch. When you ask about family, some of the best people that we've had coaching students at a picnic, at a gathering, have been spouses. Roger and Sue Crook. Roger's a 78 grad, and Sue, his wife, did go to William & Mary. They have a son who went here. And they now, they own a condo here and come down like 1 week a month on average. So anytime they're in town, I invite them to come. And Sue is just awesome with these students. Maggie and Bob Stanton. Bob went to Randolph-Macon, but he and Maggie lived overseas in Singapore for a long time. So the international students and the Chinese students just gravitate to people who have that international experience. And Bob does these kinds of things from a coaching standpoint at Randolph-Macon, and has helped SAE get rechartered even back at William & Mary because he's on some national board. So back to the family, there's spouses who are as equally involved and helpful, as our classmates and alums are. It's sort of awesome. We've had some really remarkable events. When we were in Dallas, my two favorite events, both were under the label of bring William & Mary to Dallas. So I was still living in Texas, and we flew Drew Stelgis out, who's head of Office of Community Engagement, to talk to people about the service culture at William & Mary and all the volunteerism and all the different initiatives around hunger and literacy and education. Because you may read an article about it sometime, but it wasn't that way when we were here. It's probably 15 years maybe that it's been that way. But it's so much a part of the William & Mary culture now that is a great thing for alums from our class to understand. And it makes them easy to say, well, wait a minute, I could help with that, I actually run an organization that does that. I had no idea William & Mary did that. And connect them that way. But the coolest one was during the winter before I moved to Florida. During winter break, when the William & Mary students were home, we had an event that was at a country club. So the Morelands, who lived in Plano, said, hey, you can use the country club. You know, we have to use it X amount of time anyway, so why don't you have an event there? Cool. So we used their, Ed and Carla's membership to have an event. And because students were home on winter break, we were able to get current William & Mary students to talk to alums. We had all of the recently admitted students, 100% of the students who were admitted and their families came. And then we had alums from 2013, which year it was, all the way back to 1953. And we flew Sam Sadler out to be the speaker. Now, there's nobody in the world who can represent William & Mary's history like Sam Sadler come. And he knew almost everybody, or he knew of almost everybody in the room. And to watch the interaction of all those generations of people was remarkable. It's one of those like, wow, that was awesome. Why can't every event take every one of those stakeholders, every one of those audiences from William & Mary and do that? So we try to be as broad as possible.
So which campus offices are engaged partners of staying connected?
Well, I'd say yours is high on the list. I'd say Swem Library, not only with the archiving, but doing these kinds of things and reaching out to campus organizations and partnering with us to get other organizations to say, well, why aren't you doing this kind of stuff for yourselves? Oh, by the way, I have to tell you, somebody's mom was a Theta back in the 50s and they want to get her like scrapbook over here. I said, okay, I can make that happen. So you guys have been great partners. And one of the differences about your partnership is that it started with Amy when she was here, and then there were transitions of a whole group of new leaders, but that was a really smooth transition, and you guys have been great partners. Drew Stelgis and the Office of Community Engagement team, really wonderful partners. They ask us for support. They're not afraid to ask us for support, whether it's time, talent, or treasure, but they are so open to all of our ideas. Anytime a student groups, we refer people back and forth to each other, and we've done so many things with them. Like after I leave here today, working with the fellows who are all May 14 graduates. They have one-year assignments in community engagement who are all leaving because the new fellows who are 15 graduates are coming in. So I'm working with them about debriefing. If you were starting your role over again, what are your own lessons learned? You're not going to have overlap time with this new person, so how do you convey your transitions? What about like life changes from going from student to administrator? Not just the content of literacy, education, branch out groups. So it's a more holistic approach to how do you do transitional leadership with a new group of people, and how do you help the new people start out on the right foot? So nobody's ever done that. It's just like, makes sense to do. So, let's go do it. So I'd say you guys would be top on the list, you two groups. There's other groups like Matthew Lambert is incredibly supportive. Ginger Ambler, very supportive. Deb Boykin, who worked in residence halls when I worked in residence halls back in the 70s. Anything we ever ask her, she'll help us communicate. She'll connect us with RAs. For our 40th reunion, my hall, Cam 3rd, is having a mini reunion within the 40th reunion within the college homecoming. And so the RA and I, who I've never met, are working virtually right now through email to set up activities so that the current CAM students can meet the old farts. And it just so happens that Lucas is a track guy, and we had 4 track guys on our hall. So we got a lot of common bonds, except the dorm's co-ed residence hall is co-ed now, when it was all male when we were there. So Deb, just puts me in charge of those people, and I'm given a presentation during RA training, and I worked with them on the state conference they hosted last year. So Deb Boykin's been another one who's just been really, really wonderful.
Okay. So what challenges have you faced?
Couple challenges for sure, and one is by our own creation. That is the choice we made about everything being grassroots and relational, because we know we could reach more students if we did mass publicity. but our purpose is really relational. And we just don't want people checking off the box, and we're not counting how many people come to things and how many people don't come to things. It's all about relationship and paying forward and bringing new people into the community, if you want to call it that. So we know we could reach. It was a challenge, and it's a challenge also to get other people to understand, because it's so different from normal. Because normally you post flyers, you do social media, you just spread the word. But ours is more, personal touch. It's very high touch. If I were doing it over again, I would still do that. But every once in a while, I think, we could have reached more people if we had done that. The other challenges have been, not everybody thinks this is the greatest idea in the world, and there's some turf challenges when we go into certain areas, like, well, that's my responsibility. And of course, I have plenty of bias about our way, and I think, everybody who we offer to help should say, thank you. What a great idea. But there are some people who have their own, high needs for control and turf, and I am the complete opposite of that in my whole life. So there have been some struggles with certain parts of the organization. But interestingly enough, like I used you as a positive example in Swem about transitional leadership. When Amy left and Jay was here and you're involved and Kimberly's involved and Carrie's here, really it was very smooth. And it also is 4 key people and your whole staff who help us with archiving. But in other cases, transitions have worked for us and against us. In some cases, a person who was, very much a blocker retired, new person came in, the whole world changed. All the doors opened again. In other cases where we had some pretty good relationships, new person comes in and doesn't really understand what we're doing, pretty high control, and so things have slowed down in those areas. The good part is that we have so many requests for involvement, we have so many ideas of our own, that if a door closes, we just open 3 or 4 other doors. And it's a matter of confidence from all of us that we know what we're doing works. And we will find the people, or they will find us, to take an idea. Good ideas, you just need to nurture and find a way. And some people don't see it that way, or see it as a competitive, or maybe see it as a threat, I'm not sure. But I'd say, to put it in perspective, we're talking 95% positive, supportive, everything goes well, 5% bumps in the road. It hasn't been like it. They've been big challenges that have prevented us from doing things.
So what are some of your favorite memories of your staying connected experience?
One that comes to mind, and it's just anecdotal. I had a student who asked to set up time with me at the Daily Grind, the favorite meeting place. And I said, what's the purpose? She said, I'll tell you when we get there. I said, okay. And she introduced me to some student who I ended up working with for a year. And she said, I've come into money. And we didn't talk about how much, and it wasn't anything dramatic, but I'd like to write a check to stay connected because you've done so much for us. I'd like to take advantage. It was like, how awesome is that? How awesome is that? Other ones that are more program, Sam Presser, who I mentioned in the Veterans Engagement, they had their first performance. So this was in April, I believe. It was a miserable rainy day. But the veterans who have been doing stand-up comedy and writing and music performed. And I really had no expectations about the quality, but students and professionals both were teaching them these skills. And I think there were like 11 performers. And I'd say it was amazing. But being a behavioral guy and a relationship guy, the part that struck me the most wasn't the quality of the performance, even though it was really good. It was watching Sam, who had taken this idea from just a personal passion that he had, and for very personal reasons, take it to fruition, to watch Anna and Ryan and Sam work together, and to watch the relationships between the veterans and the students. because every veteran made comment about how their lives had changed. Here we go. And how their perspective of young people had changed because of this interaction. So they came in to learn a craft, which they were always interested in or passionate about or used to do and wanted to revive. And they said, that was all really great. But really it was, how wonderful these relationships were. And it was like I was telling people with me, if I only had one thing to summarize what Staying Connected's been all about, that moment was just amazing. The other thing we did was about 3 hours before the event, is one of these last minute ideas of mine, I emailed Sam and said, I know you're not charging anybody to come and you're asking for donations, but what if we put a challenge grant out there? What if we told people as they came in that an anonymous donor had donated X amount of money, and anything up to that, would be matched. And so when I got there, I said, did you get the email? And I knew he was running around like crazy, and he was pretty nervous about this thing being pulled off because it's like years of his investment. And he said, well, yes, we're going to tell people about it, but we're not going to be assigned because the email you sent me, he was just like in stress mode. He's such a wonderful person. But he announced it at the end, and I had told Anna and Ryan, do not tell anybody, just let it be anonymous. And Sam gets up at the end, he goes, I know it's supposed to be anonymous, and I see Anna and Ryan just put their heads down like, we told them, man, we told them. But, and so they ended up, we offered a $1,000 grant, and they ended up getting $1,300. So in one, 90-minute performance, they raised $2,300, for the veterans group. So there are so many components, of that experience that were just classic Staying Connected and just really, really wonderful. And, just such pride in those students that we've worked with. And every one of us who does a lot of Staying Connected stuff, has their own group of students like, these are special people. And now they're young alums and they're paying back and they're connecting people, and, that's what the whole thing's all about.
So would these be examples of your proudest moments, or do you have other moments you were?
That one was probably Proudest Moment. One of the other ones that was very early on and was just really fun was we had a dinner at the hospitality house before it was a residence hall. That was called Residence Halls Now and Then. And we had 25 residence hall people from the 70s with 25 current RAs and residence hall staff. And it's the first big thing we ever tried to do, and it was a pretty formal thing for us. And it was just awesome to hear the stories and the questions between the students and the alums. In both directions. How do you do it now? How do we do it now? And we had a slideshow because, it's part of the archives now. Part of my job as an area director when I worked at William & Mary was I hired 2 students to be photographers. So they captured one whole year worth of activities, put a slideshow together, and we showed a PowerPoint version of that slideshow. First questions were things like, there's kegs everywhere. I said, well, the drinking age was 18 when we were here. And they said, wow, that would be good to do again. And the presidential debate, Jimmy Carter, Jerry Ford was here, so Bryan Complex took a big role in that weekend's festivities. And it was just like, wow, this is really cool stuff. And so I've probably given that slideshow a dozen times since I've been here, and we'll probably do it during homecoming for the CAM people. Because even the alums haven't seen it. They were all parts of it, but 40 years later, they've probably never seen it. It was done in '76. So that was pretty special, and part of the reason it was because it was our first big thing we really tried. And the other thing, we learned a lot from the interaction. One, we knew that all of our way of interacting, like I mentioned earlier, not an event, lots of interaction, we knew it would work. Because these were 25 strangers. They were there because they were RAs. We didn't really know them. But the other thing is, alums would come up to me and say, I think the students think we're here to give them money. we're getting a lot of questions like, oh, you could be involved because my cause, needs money for this. So we spent some time talking about time, talent, treasure. And that treasure is a possibility, but it's not the purpose of being here. But what we also did, I'd forgotten about this till this moment, was every student RA or residence hall person got to put in an organization. We had a raffle for $250. And every organization, any student there got to put in the name, and then we pulled it out of the hat. And a thing called the Weema Mary Dance Marathon won, which at that time raised money for Beyond Boobs for breast cancer survivors. That student who won, it was funny, he screamed, like $250, we spent a whole year fundraising and we only got $200, this is amazing. He ended up being an intern for me the next semester because he was just so amazed at all these alums around, working with students. He goes, wow, I want to do this. So he was an intern for me for a semester, and we supported, Dance Marathon until all the people graduated and it went away. So every single, it's like there's nothing that we do that doesn't end up with another follow-up activity or another connection or more students. It's just how it works. We invite people to just like a picnic. And we're pretty clear to them that this is not a career development event, but the conversations always go to, what's your major? Where are you from? You know this person, you know that person. Oh my God, I have a person who works in that field. I'll connect you, Happens every time. No matter, and we don't even plan any of those things because we know it's going to happen. It's just natural to happen.
So if you could go back in time to when Staying Connected first began, and you knew then what you know now, what would you do differently?
Ooh, baby. I think I would have started with the student affairs group. The initial assumption on my part, which didn't prove to be true, was that the focus should be on gathering the alums' commitment first and then reach out to the students. And we had success in doing those. But once I got involved with student affairs and community engagement, and I facilitated a leadership retreat for Ginger Ambler when they were introducing the idea of a 360 education, and she reorganized her staff. So I did the leadership retreat, worked with her and Jody and Gregg to facilitate that. And I understood more what their goals were for students. I saw so much alignment with what we were trying to do. And my own experience here was all in student affairs, being an RA, being in student government, being in student activities, that I could talk that language. I understood that perspective. And when I looked at it from the user, who's the student, then I thought, if I were doing it over again, I probably would have immediately started with working through student affairs rather than working through alumni, because that's been long-lasting, sustaining, supportive. It's been really great. That'd be the biggest one. The other thing, I probably would have bought lottery tickets and hope that I had some income. That'd be a big one. And we talked a little bit already about the mass communication versus the other one, but I don't think I would change that one. I think I would have still done it that way. If somebody does it after me, or somebody else picks it up, then I'd say they may do it differently, but as the leader of it, it matches my personal style better. I'm a big believer. It's my life's work, organizational behavior. Somebody else, may be different.
So what then do you hope is the legacy of Staying Connected? And are there plans in place to ensure it continues with another alumni class?
No plans in place with another alumni class. I have tried with a couple different classes. I've tried through community engagement, advancement, alumni. Some conversations still going on, but no plans yet. Meeting tonight with the head of student government, because the student government has interest in what could they do from a student standpoint to help make this happen. So there's still a lot of conversation happening, but no plans yet. But I forgot the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
Legacy.
Oh, the legacy. I think the legacy is all about the relationships It's all about the students who are now young alums, who already see this as just a natural way of interacting and giving back and volunteering to help. Now I was in New York City, and Taylor Nelson, class of 13, is already involved in the alumni board up there, and Brenna Anderson, class of 15, is already working with them in terms of how she can make some contributions up there. And I think it's been our modeling as a class. It's funny because a lot of people say, you class 75 people are everywhere. And really, we are everywhere, just like all those rock stars from our class who've been around for a while. But because we have the largest presence, and we're the only class that's really undertaken anything like that, lots of the students, when they think of alums, think of, oh, class 75, yeah. And it's very irritating to some other classes. But we smile. We smile about it and say, well, if you want to do it, we can help you learn how to do it. I love the idea of a class doing it. Oh, I thought of a do-over. Or something for sustainability. It'd be much easier for somebody who is in Virginia and in Williamsburg or close to Williamsburg. It would be much easier for everybody, because instead of virtual communications, you can sit in somebody's office and talk to them about it, which is the kind of thing I do in the 100 days I come, but it's hard to do. And if somebody misses a schedule, I'm back in Florida, and you can't reschedule face to face. The first year, the first full year, so the class of 15 who just graduated, they were incoming freshmen. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a hurricane and there was an earthquake, and I had 17 meetings lined up to really take this thing, and every single one was canceled. And then it was going to be a month before I came back. So it was like, I don't plan for those things, but you always have a backup plan. But some of the things could have started earlier if life didn't interfere and acts of God didn't interfere, but I can't control those. So you'd always just have a backup plan. But the class of 15 who just graduated, that was a weird graduation for me, because these were the students who came in with us when we were first getting started and just graduated, and we'll be ending in October. So they're the people who were here for the whole 4 years of our 5 years, the only group who was there. And some of those are pretty special people. And, one of them said, I can't imagine life here without staying connected. I mean, I just can't imagine. It's so much been a part of my experience since I was a freshman that, geez, what happens if people don't have that? I don't know about that. And I go, oh, yeah, I don't know what to do about that. But I do know. I'd say the old me, the old Van 10 years ago, would probably feel like guilt about, this is going to end. But, we made a 5-year commitment. We overachieved dramatically from what it started out to be and what was it intended to be. And I feel really good about that. And I know that Barb Ramsey and me and Corey, Tom, all those people are going to continue to do volunteer work. It just won't be in an integrated mass bunches of people kind of way. And the rock stars are still rock stars, and new rock stars emerge all the time. So, class 75 will be well represented. But, I need to get back to having a life and an income and a retirement someday. But, yeah, I think the old me would feel guilty about it, but I really am very at peace with, what happens. If somebody steps up, boy, I will provide as much coaching and help as I can. But I feel really good about what we've done.
So you've mentioned what's next for you after staying connected ends this year. So how do you see yourself continuing to engage with William and Mary, with the reunions or with engaging?
No, it'll be more like staying
students?
connected kind of stuff. Actually, meeting with Johanse, the student government president, tonight to get his perspective and what he thinks from a student perspective. But I actually have draft letters I'm ready to send. There are some rising juniors and seniors that we've worked with from the beginning. And my commitment to them is that anything you need until you graduate, we're going to do. And I will help you do those kinds of things. So right now I'm trying to seek from them what are some of those kinds of things. The veterans engagement stuff here, will continue to work. That's just part of our soul. That's part of what we do. Campus Kitchen was the first student group that we ever really worked with, and it's the first group we gave any funding to. They almost freaked out when we gave them $1,500. It was like, oh my God, $1,500. We thought the max was $750, and I said, well, actually, the max was $750, but your presentation to us, the work that you do was so impressive, we just doubled it. Wow, like, can you come to every meeting we ever have? And so we've been working with them for 5 years. And we bring alums to come do cooking with them together. It's not necessarily a fundraising thing, but we help them strategy. We help their executive board, figure out how to manage things better. We cook and we deliver shifts with them, and we help them do fundraising. It's all cool kind of stuff. But yeah, it's pretty special. And I lost the question again.
Okay, you answered.
Yeah, okay.
So is this then the last yearly reunion for the class of 75? Will you go back to
I'm
5
pretty
years?
sure. No, I'm pretty sure we'll do something every year, and that's because of Barb. She lives a couple blocks from campus. She has a house that was designed for entertaining. She loves doing it. So my guess is that'll probably go on forever. Whether or not it is as much student participation, to be seen, but through Barb's own work with athletics, and she's a landlord and she owns a couple properties in town, so she knows tons of students. She's on the giving board. I mean, she's all over the place, and she loves interacting with students. So my guess is that there will always be student kind of participation. I remember the other part was, what's next. So my personal involvement will be probably through the students and the organizations that we've done the most work with already, and continue with them. There's a new a student group that I've started working with called the Asian American Student Initiative, and because that's just in the early stages, that'll probably go on for a while. But other than that, and it's not going to be, we're going to be all things to all people every time somebody says, hey, Van, why don't we do this? It'll be more focused, probably more strategic and more personal. There's probably a large group. It's a large number of students, but students that we've had relationships with a long time, that it's like family. It's not, they just happen to be William Mary students. I mean, we're personally connected, and we'll continue down that path.
Any last thoughts?
No, this was fun. Sorry to ramble so much.